1 dead and 22 injured as car rams into pedestrians in Times Square. A driver with a history of drunken driving arrests plowed through crowds of pedestrians on packed sidewalks along 3 Times Square blocks Thursday, killing 1 person and injuring 22 others, officials said, touching off mayhem in one of the world's most famous and busiest plazas. The driver, Richard Rojas, 26, was taken into custody after a traffic agent tackled him as he fled from his car, a maroon Honda that came to a stop after ramming into stanchions at the corner of 45th Street and Broadway. The panic provoked by a car speeding on sidewalks in the heart of Manhattan immediately evoked the specter of terrorism, but law enforcement officials said they had determined that did not seem to have a role in the episode. Based on information we have at this moment, there is no indication that this was an act of terrorism, Mayor Bill de Blasio told reporters at a news conference in Times Square. We all feel deeply right now for those who were injured and for their families. A few blocks away from where the mayor spoke, the Honda sat tilted on bollards, its right wheels in the air and its front hood crumpled, as detectives and investigators canvassed the area. Officials said that the deadly rampage had begun around noon near 42nd Street, when Mr. Rojas, traveling south on 7th Avenue, inexplicably made a quick U-turn, mounted a curb on the west side of the one-way avenue and began to drive north against traffic. Witnesses described their horror at seeing a car race through the area, which was thronged with tourists, workers and other passers-by on a sultry afternoon. Annie Donahue, 24, had just left work on 7th Avenue between 42nd and 43rd Streets when the car sped past her and slammed into pedestrians on the sidewalk. It was going at a fast rate of speed and to me it looked like it was trying to hit as many people as possible, she said. People were trying to jump out of the way. An 18-year-old woman who was walking with her 13-year-old sister on a sidewalk between 42nd and 43rd Streets was killed, officials said. The police did not provide the dead woman's name. Her sister was also injured, they said. 4 other people were critically injured after sustaining multiple fractures and traumas, Daniel P. Negro, the fire commissioner said. They were taken to 2 different hospitals. 3 other people were also taken to hospitals in serious condition. The other victims had less serious injuries. Mr. Rojas, who lives in the Bronx, had not been formally charged by Thursday afternoon. He was scheduled to undergo testing for the presence of drugs or alcohol in his system, officials said. Mr. Rojas, a Navy veteran, was arrested for drunken driving twice, in Queens in 2008, and in Manhattan in 2015, officials said. He was also recently arrested for menacing, officials said. Sharif White, who sells t-shirts and hats at the corner of 44th Street and 7th Avenue, stood next to a woman who was lying on her back on a sidewalk and surrounded by paramedics. It hit her, Mr. White said of the car, pointing to the woman, who was moaning in pain. And it hit a couple of other people. Then the next thing I know it went straight down to 45th. It just was doing like about 100 miles per hour and then the car crashed. The car's bumper sat nearby in the middle of the sidewalk. Mogdi Tawfiq, a hot dog vendor whose stand was near the corner, said the car had hit 3 people there. The car sped through here, it was moving so fast, and it crushed all these people, he said. A victim in a neck brace was taken away in a wheelchair. The US-led coalition struck a convoy of military vehicles belonging to Shia militias loyal to the Syrian government near the border in Jordan on Thursday, according to US officials. The strike took place a few miles away from the armed opposition rebel base in the town of Al-Tanf, where American and British special forces are training rebels opposed to Bashar al-Assad. According to a U.S. defense official, the pro-Assad militia convoy was heading to a remote coalition garrison near the Jordanian border. The U.S. official also said the coalition airstrike did not directly target the Syrian army but Shia militias who support the Syrian government which was operating in the area. A convoy going down the road didn't respond to numerous ways for it to be warned off from getting too close to coalition forces in Al-Tanf, the official told AFP on condition of anonymity. Attempts to halt the convoy included a call to the Russians, who are working with the Syrian regime, the official said, before show of force above the vehicles, followed by warning shots. Then there was finally a strike against the lead portion of that movement, the official said, adding that while the convoy was significant in size, only the lead vehicles were hit. The attack allegedly destroyed tanks and other military vehicles belonging to the Iranian-backed Imam Ali Brigade, according to pro-government media outlets. Attack after notification. Muzahem al-Saloom, from the Maghil al-Thra group, told Reuters that the jets struck after rebel forces clashed with advancing Syrian and Iranian militias that were about 27 kilometers from the base. We notified the coalition that we were being attacked by the Syrian army and Iranians at this point, and the coalition came and destroyed the advancing convoy, Saloom said. Earlier today, pro-Iranian government media outlets had reported that 3,000 Hezbollah fighters were deployed to the Al-Tanf region to protect the area from U.S. interests. While publicly U.S. strategy in the Afghan war has been based around the conceit that the conflict is in a stalemate, despite mounting losses by the Afghan government. Advisors have offered a classified assessment on the conflict recently, however, conceding that the Ghani government's survival is at risk, and that the war is being slowly lost. Their solution, as with everyone else, is even bigger escalation, with reports from those familiar with the plan saying that the U.S. needs more than 50,000 ground troops in Afghanistan to ensure Ghani's survival, with an eye toward eventually defeating the Taliban. That's a big escalation, and a much bigger one than has been suggested in previous reports, which initially presented the proposed escalation as 3,000 to 5,000, and most recently made it a choice between 3,000 or keeping troop levels flat. The Pentagon is evasive about troop levels in recent months, but around 8,400 troops are believed to presently be in Afghanistan. So 50,000 would be a massive escalation, resembling the one President Obama tried when he took office, and for mostly the same reason, that they think it might conceivably turn a long struggling war around. That it didn't lead to victory last time appears to be totally ignored in the latest assessment. It might come as a surprise to many Americans that their government does not classify Al-Qaeda in Syria as a terrorist organization. The reason it refuses to make the determination would shock them even more. The Syrian franchise of the organization involved in the 9/11 attacks on New York and Washington has long gone by the name Jabhat al-Nusra, Nusra Front, and was sent into Syria by the head of Al-Qaeda in Iraq, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. Baghdadi went on to launch the rival breakaway group ISIS, while Nusra maintained its status as Al-Qaeda's boots on the ground in the war against the Syrian government. In 2015 the group decided to rebrand itself Jabhat Fatah al-Shamwil, as reported by the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, continuing to incorporate smaller organizations into its structure. This is one of the reasons for the failure of last year's cessation of hostilities in Syria. The moderate fighters and the legitimate terrorists were so intermingled that it was impossible for the U.S. to separate them. But the State Department did not buy into the PR makeover of Al-Qaeda and designated al-Sham a terrorist organization as well. Then, early this year, al-Shams decided on a new rebranding and decided to name itself Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS. The leader of the new group is the same old leader, and is listed by the U.S. as a specially designated global terrorist with a $10 million bounty on his head. But strangely enough, the U.S. has not designated the new organization a terrorist organization even as it warns off other groups seeking to join the newly branded Al-Qaeda in Syria. Why is that? Again from the Canadian state news agency. The reasons for the reluctance to list the new Al-Qaeda formation may have to do with one of its new members, the Nuruddin Zinki Brigade, a jihadi group from the Aleppo Governorate. The Zinki Brigade was an early and prominent recipient of U.S. aid, weapons, and training. For the U.S. to designate HTS now would mean acknowledging that it supplied sophisticated weapons including TOW anti-tank missiles to terrorists, and draw attention to the fact that the U.S. continues to arm Islamist militias in Syria. You read that right. The reason the U.S. cannot designate Al-Qaeda in Syria as a terrorist group is because that would make the U.S. legally responsible for having supplied a terrorist group with extremely sophisticated weapons and training? The US is arming and training terrorists in Syria, but instead of just getting out, it is pretending that Al-Qaeda is not a terrorist organization. Whether it's information technology, gymnastics, or Shaolin Kung Fu, 11-year-old Ruben Paul knocks it out of the park. This kid from Austin, Texas, just stunned a crowd of cybersecurity experts at a conference in the Netherlands by demonstrating how just about anything can be weaponized when it's connected to the internet. From airplanes to automobiles, from smartphones to smart homes, anything or any toy can be part of the Internet of Things, IoT, Paul said while speaking at the World Forum in The Hague. From Terminators to teddy bears, anything or any toy can be weaponized. The sixth grader, who also excels in gymnastics and is the youngest ever American to earn a Shaolin Kung Fu black belt, put his money where his mouth was. To back up his claims, he presented a teddy bear that connects to Wi-Fi using Bluetooth technology. Paul then plugged a small device known as a Raspberry Pi into his laptop. The 11-year-old scanned the room for Bluetooth devices, then, to everyone's amazement, according to Agence France-Presse, he downloaded dozens of phone numbers from the cybersecurity experts gathered in the room. Then, using a computer language program called Python, Paul hacked into the teddy bear's system using one of the collected numbers. To hammer his point home, he turned on the toy's light and recorded a message from an audience member. At-home appliances, things that can be used in our everyday lives, our cars, lights, refrigerators, Paul told AFP after the conference, everything like this that is connected can be used and weaponized to spy on us or harm us. The Wonderkind's father, information technology expert Mono Paul, while admittedly shocked by the types of security vulnerabilities his son is able to expose, says Ruben has been doing this type of thing all his life. He has always surprised us. Every moment when we teach him something, he's usually the one who ends up teaching us.